Each recorded action speaks volumes. Every close observation uncovers facts. Protecting your civil rights, revealing definitive justice.
Mind telling me what you're doing out here? We had a call about two individuals hanging around the park.
Just sitting.
Enjoying the day. Is there a problem? Well, folks don't usually post up on this bench for hours. Makes people uneasy, you know what I
We're
mean?
not bothering anyone. We had lunch. Now we're reading.
Public park. Where are you two from? Live around here?
For 15 years, Officer Derek Brennan had operated with impunity in Riverside County. His 3 prior complaints for discriminatory policing buried in a department more interested in protecting its own than protecting citizens. He'd made a habit of patrolling Maplewood Park and its surrounding affluent streets, approaching anyone who didn't match the neighborhood's predominantly white demographic and suggesting they'd be more comfortable elsewhere. On May 14, 2024, during his routine afternoon patrol, he spotted Marcus and Diane Thompson sitting together on a park bench and immediately decided they were either criminals or didn't belong, possibly both. "I don't know what you two are really doing here, but this lovey-dovey act isn't fooling anyone," Brennan announced as he approached on foot, his hand resting on his belt as he accused them of casing homes for burglaries or dealing drugs under the guise of being a couple, threatening to arrest them both for trespassing and loitering if they didn't leave the public park immediately. What Brennan couldn't see beneath their casual weekend clothes were 2 FBI badges, 2 service weapons, and 2 federal agents who now had him dead to rights on civil rights violations that would end his career before sunset. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to hit the like button for more stories you don't want to miss. Marcus Thompson, 38, had spent 12 years with the FBI's Organized Crime Division, working undercover operations that had dismantled major criminal enterprises across the eastern seaboard. Sitting next to him was his wife of 8 years, Diane Thompson, 36, a decorated agent in the FBI's Civil Rights Division who'd built her career prosecuting exactly the kind of behavior they were about to experience firsthand. They'd driven 2 hours from Richmond to spend a rare Saturday off in Maplewood Park, a place Diane had loved as a child visiting her grandmother nearby. Marcus had just made her laugh with a story about their daughter when Diane's smile faded, her eyes tracking something over his shoulder. "We've got company," she said quietly, her tone shifting in a way Marcus immediately recognized. Officer Derek Brennan was 47, a man who'd plateaued at patrol officer after failing the promotional exam 3 times. His personnel file told a story his supervisors preferred to ignore, a 2016 complaint from a Hispanic family he'd harassed until they moved, a 2019 incident where he'd demanded ID from a black teenager on his own porch, and a 2021 grievance from an Asian American businessman he'd detained for acting suspicious while opening his own store. Each time, the department issued warnings, sent him to half-day bias training, and moved on. Brennan had learned he could get away with it. "Afternoon," Brennan said, positioning himself directly in front of them. "I'm going to need to see some identification from both of you." Marcus spoke first, his voice calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Brennan replied. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Break-ins, drug transactions, and you two don't exactly fit the usual profile of people who come to this park." Diane felt Marcus's hand briefly touch her knee, their signal to stay calm and document everything. She casually reached for her phone on the bench beside her, angling it against her purse so the camera faced forward, and tapped the screen twice to start the voice recording app. The phone's screen went dark, but the red indicator confirmed it was capturing everything. Marcus adjusted slightly, ensuring his body didn't block the angle. "We're just enjoying the afternoon," Diane said evenly. "This is a public park. We have every right to be here." Brennan's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you two are really doing here, but this lovey-dovey act isn't fooling anyone. I think you're casing those houses across the street, or maybe you're here to make a deal and figured you'd blend in better as a couple." He stepped closer, his hand resting on his handcuffs. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to provide identification right now, and then you're going to leave this park. If you're still here in 5 minutes, I'm arresting both of you for trespassing and loitering. Are we clear?" Marcus felt his heart rate increase, not from fear, but from professional recognition of what was happening. In 12 years with the Bureau, he'd seen this scenario in case files and civil rights investigations. He'd just never been on this side of it. Next to him, Diane remained still, the phone recording every word, both of them mentally cataloging everything for the report they'd filed the moment this ended. What Officer Derek Brennan didn't know as he stood there, chest puffed with authority he was about to lose, was that he just threatened to arrest two of the FBI's most experienced agents, and every word was being captured on audio, building a federal case that would end his career before sunset. The confrontation had begun, and it was about to get much worse. Marcus Thompson had faced armed criminals, navigated tense hostage negotiations, and stared down mob bosses without flinching. But sitting on that park bench watching Officer Brennan's hand hover near his handcuffs triggered something different. A cold, familiar anger that came from being treated like a suspect in his own country. Diane felt it too, though her training in the Civil Rights Division had prepared her for this exact moment in ways most people would never understand. She'd prosecuted cases where officers like Brennan had cost cities millions in settlements and destroyed innocent lives with their unchecked bias. Now she was living it. "Officer, we're not looking for any trouble," Marcus said, keeping his voice level and non-threatening. "We're happy to show you our identification, but I'd like to know what specific suspicious activity you're referring to. What reports are you talking about?" "I don't need to explain myself to you," Brennan snapped, his voice rising. "When a police officer asks for your ID, you provide it. That's how this works, unless you've got something to hide, which I'm starting to think you do." Diane shifted slightly on the bench, making sure her phone was still positioned to capture the audio clearly. She could see a few other park visitors in the distance, an elderly couple walking their dog, a jogger passing by, but no one close enough to witness what was happening. That isolation made the situation more dangerous. "We don't have anything to hide," Diane said, her tone professional but firm. "But you've accused us of criminal activity without any basis. You've threatened to arrest us for sitting in a public park. We have a right to know what we're being accused of." Brennan took another step forward, now standing directly over them in a clear attempt at intimidation. His shadow fell across their faces as the afternoon sun positioned itself behind him. This was a tactic he'd used hundreds of times. Use his physical presence to make people feel small, threatened, cornered. "You want to know what you're being accused of?" Brennan said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I've been patrolling this neighborhood for over a decade. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. And you two definitely don't belong here. This park, these houses, this whole area, it's not for people like you. So either you're here to steal something, sell something, or you're running some kind of con. Maybe you're scouting houses to rob later, or maybe you're dealing drugs and using this couple routine as cover." Marcus felt Diane's hand discreetly touch his arm, another signal. She was telling him to let Brennan keep talking, to let him dig his own grave deeper with every word. The recording was capturing everything, and the more Brennan said, the stronger their case became. "Officer Brennan," Marcus said, reading the name tag on the uniform and making sure to say it clearly for the recording. "You're racially profiling us. You have no evidence of any crime. You have no reasonable suspicion. You're violating our Fourth Amendment rights." The mention of constitutional rights made Brennan's face turn a deeper shade of red. He hated when people threw legal terms at him, as if knowing their rights somehow made them better than him. His hand moved from his handcuffs to his radio. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Brennan said, his voice now openly hostile, throwing around big words and amendments. "Let me tell you something. I've been doing this job long enough to know criminals when I see them, and everything about you two screams wrong." He unclipped his radio and brought it to his mouth. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I need backup at Maplewood Park, north entrance near the pond. I've got 2 suspicious individuals refusing to cooperate with a lawful order. Possible 10, 60, possible narcotics involvement." Diane and Marcus exchanged a glance. A 1060 was code for a suspicious person, and by adding possible narcotics involvement to the radio call, Brennan was creating an official record that painted them as drug suspects. This wasn't just harassment anymore. He was actively constructing a false narrative that could justify an arrest, a search, or worse. "We've been cooperating completely," Diane said, her voice steady. "You're the one who approached us without cause. We've committed no crime. We've shown no suspicious behavior. And we've been nothing but respectful." "Respectful?" Brennan laughed bitterly. "You've been questioning me from the moment I got here. That's not respect. That's resistance. And in my experience, people who resist usually have something to hide. So here's what's going to happen next. You're going to stand up. You're going to place your hands where I can see them, and you're going to wait right here until my backup arrives." Marcus slowly stood up from the bench, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He was 6 feet tall and physically fit, and he could see Brennan's body language shift into a more defensive posture as he rose. Diane remained seated for a moment, her hand still near her phone, before she too stood up slowly. "We're standing," Marcus said calmly, "but we're not under arrest, correct? Are we being detained?" "You're not free to leave," Brennan said, which was a detention without using the word. "And if you try to leave, I will arrest you for obstruction and resisting." In the distance, they could hear the sound of another police siren approaching. Brennan had called for backup, which meant at least one more officer was about to arrive and witness whatever happened next. Marcus and Diane knew this could go one of two ways. Either the backup officer would be reasonable and de-escalate the situation, or they would support Brennan and make everything worse. Brennan stood with his arms crossed, a satisfied look on his face as the siren grew louder. He'd done this dance before, and in his mind, he'd already won. These two would be escorted out of the park, possibly arrested, and definitely taught a lesson about knowing their place. He had backup coming. He had his authority, and he had 15 years of getting away with exactly this kind of behavior. What Officer Brennan still didn't know was that the two people standing in front of him weren't just recording his every word. They were federal agents who had built careers on taking down people who abused their power. The backup unit's siren grew closer, and in less than 2 minutes, Derek Brennan's entire world was about to collapse. The backup patrol car pulled into the Maplewood Park parking lot with lights flashing but no siren, and Officer Jamie Chin stepped out with the practiced caution of someone who'd responded to hundreds of these calls. She was 32 years old, a 7-year veteran of the Riverside County Police Department, and she'd worked enough shifts with Derek Brennan to know that his suspicious person calls often turned out to be nothing more than his personal biases playing out in real time. As she walked toward the pond area where Brennan stood with 2 civilians, she noticed immediately that the couple looked calm, composed, and completely non-threatening, which made her wonder why Brennan had called for backup at all. "What have we got, Brennan?" Chen asked as she approached, her hand resting naturally on her belt, but nowhere near her weapon. She made eye contact with Marcus and Diane, offering a slight nod that acknowledged their presence as human beings rather than automatic threats. "These two have been sitting here acting suspicious," Brennan said, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of someone who felt validated by backup arriving. "They're refusing to provide identification, questioning my authority, and I believe they may be involved in the recent break-ins we've had in this area, possibly narcotics activity as well." Officer Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd heard this script before from Brennan, and it rarely matched reality. She looked at Marcus and Diane again, taking in their weekend casual clothing, their relaxed posture despite the obvious tension of the situation, and the way they stood with their hands visible and non-threatening. Nothing about them screamed suspicious to her trained eye. "Have they committed any crime?" Chen asked Brennan directly, her tone professional but pointed. "They're trespassing and loitering," Brennan said quickly, though the weakness of the charge was obvious even as he said it. "In a public park?" Chen said, unable to keep the skepticism out of her voice. "During the middle of the afternoon?" Marcus decided this was the moment. He'd been patient. He'd been calm. He'd let Brennan dig himself into a hole so deep that there would be no climbing out. Diane caught his eye and gave the smallest nod. She was thinking the same thing. 15 minutes of illegal detention, racial profiling, threats of false arrest, and baseless accusations, all captured on audio recording. It was time to end this. Officer Chen, Marcus said, his voice shifting from the careful, non-threatening tone he'd been using with Brennan to something more authoritative. My name is Marcus Thompson. This is my wife, Diane Thompson. Before this goes any further, there's something you and Officer Brennan need to know. Brennan stepped forward aggressively. I told you to keep your hands where I can see them and wait quietly. I didn't give you permission to speak. Marcus ignored him completely, maintaining eye contact with Officer Chen, who seemed more interested in what he had to say than Brennan's bluster. Marcus reached slowly into his jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and clear. I'm going to show you my credentials now. Don't you dare reach into your... Brennan started, his hand moving toward his weapon. Brennan, stand down, Chen said sharply, her instincts telling her something was very wrong with this entire situation. Marcus withdrew a black leather credential case and flipped it open. On one side was a gold badge that caught the afternoon sunlight. On the other side was an identification card with an official seal that Officer Chen recognized immediately. Her eyes went wide. I'm Special Agent Marcus Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Organized Crime Division, Marcus said, his voice now carrying the full weight of federal authority. This is Special Agent Diane Thompson, FBI Civil Rights Division. And for the past 15 minutes, Officer Brennan, you've been violating our constitutional rights while we documented every single word. The color drained from Brennan's face so quickly he looked like he might faint. His mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. You... what? No, that's not... Diane reached down and picked up her phone from where it had been recording the entire interaction. She held it up so both officers could see the screen clearly. Everything you've said and done has been recorded. Every accusation, every threat, every racially motivated statement. We have audio documentation of you claiming we don't belong in this neighborhood, accusing us of being criminals without any evidence, threatening us with false arrest, calling in false reports of narcotics activity, and illegally detaining us in violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. Officer Chen took several steps back from Brennan, physically distancing herself from what was unfolding. Her face showed a mixture of shock and resignation. She'd known Brennan was a problem, but she'd never imagined he'd be stupid enough to do this to federal agents. There's been a misunderstanding, Brennan stammered, his voice shaking now. All the authority and aggression had evaporated, replaced by pure panic. I was just doing my job. We've had reports. What reports? Marcus cut them off, his voice cold and precise. Give me the incident numbers. Give me the case files. Give me a single piece of evidence that justifies your actions here today. He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. You can't, because there are no reports. You racially profiled us the moment you saw us. You decided we didn't belong here, based solely on the color of our skin. Brennan's hands were shaking now. 15 years of getting away with this exact behavior. 15 years of complaints that went nowhere, and he'd finally done it to the wrong people. Federal agents who not only had the power to end his career, but the professional expertise to do it correctly, thoroughly, and permanently. Diane pulled out her own credentials, showing them to Officer Chen, who nodded in acknowledgement. Officer Chen, I'm going to need your name, badge number, and your supervisor's contact information. You'll be listed as a witness to this encounter, though based on your arrival time, you weren't present for the bulk of the civil rights violations. Yes, ma'am, Chen said immediately. Pulling out her notebook, Officer Jamie Chen, badge number 2847. My supervisor is Sergeant Bill Morrison. He's on duty right now at the station. Good, Diane said. You're going to call Sergeant Morrison and tell him to get down here immediately. And then you're going to call your chief of police and inform them that 2 FBI agents are filing formal complaints against one of their officers for civil rights violations, racial profiling, illegal detention, and filing false police reports. Brennan found his voice again, desperation making it crack. Listen, we can work this out. I made a mistake, okay? I didn't know who you were. If I'd known you were agents. That's exactly the problem, Marcus said, and his voice was ice cold now. You didn't treat us this way because you didn't know we were federal agents. You treated us this way because we're black. And the fact that you think our badges should have protected us, that you think this treatment is somehow acceptable for regular citizens who don't have federal authority, that tells me everything I need to know about you. The words hit Brennan like physical blows. He stood there in his uniform, surrounded by the authority he'd abused for 15 years, and finally understood that it was all over. No more patrol, no more badge, no more power over people he considered beneath him. His career was finished, and it had ended in the most humiliating way possible, brought down by 2 federal agents on their day off. Diane looked at Marcus, and in that glance was everything they'd both experienced throughout their lives. Every time they'd been followed in stores, questioned in nice neighborhoods, or treated as threats instead of citizens. The difference was that this time, they had the power to do something about it. Officer Brennan, Diane said, her voice carrying the weight of not just her own authority, but every person Brennan had ever harassed. You're done. Sergeant Bill Morrison arrived at Maplewood Park 12 minutes after Officer Chen's call, and the moment he saw Marcus and Diane's federal credentials, his face went pale. He'd been a supervisor for 19 years, long enough to know that what he was looking at was a department-ending scandal. Within an hour, the park had transformed into something resembling a crime scene. Not because any crime had been committed by Marcus and Diane, but because the Riverside County Police Department was now scrambling to contain the massive civil rights violation one of their officers had just committed against 2 federal agents. Chief of Police Robert Hendricks arrived personally, his presence a clear indication of how seriously the department was taking this. He listened to the audio recording Diane played for him, and with each passing second, his expression grew darker. Brennan's voice came through crystal clear. Every racist assumption, every baseless accusation, every threat captured in perfect detail. Officer Brennan, Chief Hendricks said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You're suspended immediately, pending a full internal investigation. Badge and weapon now. Brennan's hands shook as he unclipped his badge and removed his service weapon, handing them over to his chief. 15 years of his career ended in that single moment, in the same park where he'd felt so powerful just an hour earlier. Officer Chen stood nearby as a witness, documenting everything in her report. Marcus and Diane filed formal complaints with both the Riverside County Police Department and the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The audio recording was submitted as evidence, along with their detailed written statements about the encounter. When investigators pulled Brennan's body camera footage, it confirmed everything. Every word, every gesture, every moment of racial profiling captured from his own perspective. The body cam showed him approaching the couple without any legitimate cause, making baseless accusations, and escalating the situation entirely on his own. Within 48 hours, the FBI opened an official investigation into Brennan's conduct, and a review of his 15-year career revealed a pattern of racial profiling that the department had consistently ignored. 3 weeks later, Officer Derek Brennan was terminated from the Riverside County Police Department. The internal investigation, supported by both the audio recording and his own body camera footage, found that he had violated multiple department policies, engaged in racial profiling, illegally detained citizens, and filed false reports. The body cam evidence was particularly damning because it eliminated any possibility of him claiming the recordings were taken out of context or altered. His own camera had documented his downfall. But the consequences didn't end there. The FBI's investigation expanded to include the department's handling of previous complaints against Brennan, and federal prosecutors began reviewing whether his actions constituted a pattern of civil rights violations that warranted criminal charges. For Marcus and Diane Thompson, the experience was bittersweet. They had the power and authority to hold Brennan accountable in ways most of his victims never could. But as they drove home that evening, they couldn't stop thinking about all the other people Brennan had harassed over 15 years. People who didn't have FBI badges, who couldn't fight back, who had simply been forced to endure his racism and move on. Officer Derek Brennan's career was over, but the fight against the systemic racism that had protected him for so long was far from finished. If this story hit home for you, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories that shine a light on injustice and accountability. See you in the next one.
Upholding justice is a vital pursuit, and understanding acts as your armor. Thank you for joining us and demanding transparency.